Welcome to the webinar, No Excuses Poverty Initiative, Building Systemic Support for Low-Income Students. I'm your host, Kathy McDonald, Assistant Director for Network Partnerships with the Florida College Access Network. Let me go ahead and change slides here. There we go. That's me. Today's guest presenter is Dr. Russell Lowry-Hart. I'm thrilled to welcome him on our call today. He's such an innovative leader and president of Amarillo College. He was selected into the inaugural class of the Aspen Presidential Fellowship for Community College Excellence, a rigorous executive leadership program focused on higher education reform led by the Aspen Institute and Stanford University. His leadership is focused on improving student success through systemic and cultural change. He was named the National Academic Leader of the Year for 2014. He received his PhD from Ohio University, an MA from Texas Tech, and a BS from West Texas A&M. While his calling is education reform, his passion is his family. His wife, Tara, sons Christopher and Campbell, daughter Cadence, and dog Sadie fill his life with beauty and joy. Before we get started with today's presentation, a few housekeeping items. First, we welcome your questions. This is all about learning together, so please submit your questions in the box, which you should see on the right side of your screen if you're viewing from a desktop computer. We will allot time at the end of today's webinar for our guest presenter to answer questions, but you can submit them at any time, and I encourage you to do so. Second, please share what you're learning on your favorite social media platform using the hashtags FCAN, Candid Conversations, and No Excuses Poverty Initiative. You can also follow on Twitter Amarillo College at Amarillo College, at Lowry Hart, and use the hashtag AC Culture of Caring. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. All materials will be available within a week of recording. You should also see a resources handout in your dashboard on the right that includes links to the research study we'll be referencing today, as well as hot off the presses, a case study on Amarillo College's work that is underway. I encourage you to check those out. Now, for those of you who are new to the Florida College Access Network, a bit about us. Our mission is to create and strengthen a statewide network that catalyzes and supports communities to improve college and career readiness, access, and completion for all students. Our vision is to see at least 60% of working age Floridians to hold a high quality post-secondary degree or credential by the year 2025. We accomplish our work in three primary ways. First, we support the formation and growth of local college access networks, which are multi-sector strategic alliances that collaborate to ensure more student success in preparing for tomorrow's jobs. The majority of the jobs in the next decade will require some form of education beyond high school, and LCANs help students by fostering partnerships among education institutions, community groups, business leaders, government, and philanthropy. Currently, 78.3% of the state is now supported by an LCAN. Second, FCAN's research data and policy work. We produce student-centered research and policy analysis. We act as a clearinghouse for college and career readiness, access and completion data, and we develop local, state, and national partnerships and policy alignment around degree attainment. Finally, we support the efforts of schools and districts throughout our state under the umbrella of College Ready Florida. We now have over 300 schools throughout the state participating in at least one of these initiatives that help students not only apply to college, afford college, but then start college in the fall. Okay, let's get started for today's topic. Now, to set the stage, let's look at how far a Pell Grant goes versus how far it went a generation ago. In 1975, a federal Pell Grant covered 79% of the cost of attending a four-year public college, including tuition, fees, room, and board. Today, it covers just 29%. That's according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities from back in June of last year. Those are national numbers, and while Florida has worked hard to keep college affordable, still we have students who need help meeting basic life needs. So let's start by encouraging a poll. Let's see you all vote for what percent of Florida undergraduates are low income. Do you think it's 13%, 36%, 44%, or 57%? Let's give you an opportunity to vote here. Okay, about 5 more seconds and we'll close it out. Okay, let's go and close that out and let's share the results. So as you can see, you all are brilliant because the majority of you guessed that it was 44%, which is indeed the percent of undergraduates who are considered low income, and that's measured by the number of students who receive Pell Grants. We know it's a proxy. It's not permanent in terms of, showing everything that reflects student need, but it gives us some indications. So great job there. More students are receiving Pell Grants today. The percent of Pell Grant recipients recently grew 20 points over 5 years, according to an analysis by the Florida College System. We also know that these students enroll in college at 10.9% lower than their non-low income peers. And yet, the good news is, in Florida, we outperform the nation with on-time Pell Grant recipient graduation. Our Pell Grant recipients graduate within 6 years at 57%, and we also can be proud that there's only a 5% gap between those who receive the Pell Grant and those that don't. This is compared to a national average of a 16-point gap. So we do have some good news to speak to, but that doesn't mean we don't still have work to do and that we would like to improve. So let's go to our next poll. And this poll looks at what are some of the challenges that you see with your students in terms of the challenges that they're facing? Housing insecurity, food insecurity, transportation, childcare, or inability to buy books and other supplies. Let's give you a couple of seconds more to vote on that. Okay, about 2 more seconds. Okay, let's go with that and let's share. So we see that 74% of you are seeing students with housing insecurity, 66% recognize food insecurity, 74% transportation, huge issue in our state, 50% childcare, and 69% inability to buy books and other supplies. So clearly we're seeing some basic life issues across the board among our students, which makes this a timely topic for us. So when we look at, while Pell Grant eligibility is a good proxy for low-income status, we do know that students, even outside of Pell Grant recipients, still struggle with some basic life needs. There was a recent national study conducted by the Wisconsin Hope Lab that it was the largest study of its kind that received participation from 33,000 students at 70 community colleges in 24 states. And while it wasn't nationally representative, it did give us some insight into how students struggle with some of these basic needs. What it found was that 2/3 of community college students were food insecure. About half of community college students are housing insecure, and 13 to 14% were homeless. These are some pretty startling statistics, and yet many of our faculty and staff throughout our campuses know that our students are struggling, and we need to find more comprehensive ways to give them the support they need to succeed. While there's more to learn about how students struggle with basic needs, we do know that these can get in the way of their success, and we're all here to learn more about how we can help them. So one last poll before I turn it over to our speaker. What do you perceive to be the biggest hurdle in getting your institution focused more on providing more support for low-income students? Is it faculty buy-in, senior leadership buy-in, how to fund initiatives like emergency aid, entrenched policies and procedures, or the perception that it's not really a problem here? If you haven't voted, go ahead and vote. A couple more seconds. Okay, 2 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that out. What we found is 8% faculty buy-in, so good. We're not seeing our faculty members as obstacles. 16% senior leadership buy-in, 30% how to fund initiatives like emergency aid. That's good to know. Hopefully Dr. Larry Hart can give us some good info on that front. 24% entrenched policies and procedures, and 22% that it's not really a problem here. Okay, so let's go ahead and sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't shared that with you. There's the share. Okay, and then I am going to go ahead and hide that. And with that, I am going to change things over to Dr. Lowry Hart. And you should have the controls.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Kathleen, to share the Amarillo College story. Not even as an example to follow, but I think as a co-actor in this work that we're all trying to figure out together. I never would have thought that I would be talking with my colleagues across the country about issues of poverty. I am a recovering faculty member who got into this work because I loved my content in communication, and thought that I would spend the rest of my time in this profession teaching students how to work in teams and how to do communication analysis for rhetorical studies. But as I got into administrative work, I had a different understanding of who our students were and what they needed from us. So when I came to Amarillo College in 2011, I looked at our success rates, and they were not what we needed them to be as a college or as a community. And we started looking at demographic shifts for our region and the state, and realized that over the next 40 years, if we didn't change something, the economic hope that we were trying to offer through education wasn't going to be available to the communities in which we resided. And so in dissecting where we were, we started to learn a lot about our students and the barriers they were bringing with them to the classroom. I don't often talk about poverty from strictly a place of service, though. We have to engage in this work because of economics. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is Edward Glazer's book, Triumph of the City, which is really looking at the communities that are going to win and the communities that are going to lose over the next 20 to 30 years. And what he says is that for every 10% increase in college degrees in your community, you'll get a 22% increase in GDP. Yet he predicts a decrease in college certificates, degrees, and completion, and that communities like mine in Amarillo, where only 30% of my community has a post-secondary credential of any kind, Our communities are going to be monolithically growing in low-skill manual labor jobs, which are important jobs, and we need more of those jobs. But our economies cannot be built on one job sector, and particularly a job sector that is low paying. So while the work that we're engaging in involves a lot of love and a lot of intentionality, the bottom line is it makes good economic sense. It's something that we have to engage in if we want to keep our economy moving forward. What that means to me is that communities need community colleges differently now than at any point in our history. Universities and community colleges are going to have to work together differently more now than at any time in our history. But the community's economic futures rest in the hands of higher education, and we have to take that future and act on it in really aggressive ways. And this is the reason we're acting on it at Amarillo College. It's our students. I want to introduce you to Maria. She's the typical student at Amarillo College. She's smart. She's ambitious. She is incredibly hardworking, but she brings challenges with her that higher education entities have not been set up to address. And we're going to have to reimagine ourselves to serve Maria. This is the typical student at Amarillo College. She's first generation college student. She's part-time. What I'm most excited about Maria is until we started this work 3 years ago, 79% of our students were part-time, and through acceleration and our systemic approach to poverty and data analytics, we've been able to move 19% of our students from part-time to full-time, which is a big, huge bonus for them and frankly for our bottom line as well. For the first time in our history, Maria is minority, and 46% of our students are Hispanic. Like your students, she's female. She needs financial assistance. She doesn't necessarily come to college with the skill set to be academically successful. But because of our work with our ISDs and our really intensive summer pre-work, only 21% of our Marias actually have to enroll in Dev Ed. And generally, our students come to us with a transfer focus, although 49% are just here to get a workforce certification. The reason we focus on poverty is because Maria is a 27-year-old mother of 1.2 kids who's working on average 2 part-time jobs at 38 hours a week. That is our typical Amarillo College student. I'm guessing she's not that different from the students in your own community. Kathleen referenced earlier that the transition of what Pell is supposed to cover. So when I advocate for Maria, this is her reality. If she's full Pell eligible and she's working 40 hours a week and is maximizing other resources that she might qualify for and going to school full time, she still is short $3,000 over the course of the semester. So there aren't a lot of students that can manage to matriculate into our institutions, stay, and then graduate when they're working full-time or at least 2 part-time jobs to the equivalent of a full-time job, raising a family, using Pell money, and still having to pay out of pocket to get the education that's actually going to reshape not just her future, but the future of our community. When I came to Amarillo College in 2011 and 12, I saw our success rates as I referenced, and I was really worried about them. So I asked students to tell me through a series of focus groups and then survey data, what was your biggest barrier to success in the classroom? And what they told me changed who I am professionally and personally. I was expecting that the high school didn't prepare me. I hate math. I didn't understand the instructor. We needed new pedagogies. And instead, what I've learned is that the top 10 issues that our students identified
One of my biggest
are
goals in
what
life
Linda's
is to make
talking
my
about
parents
now, and
and
I
my
want you to
family
meet
proud of
her.
me. And education is what they think will get me to anything. They want me to be successful, and education is always key. So being the first generation, you know, I'm the first generation to go to college. It's an honor, and it's a lot of pressure also, but it's really worth it. I can't think of anything else that would make me feel more proud because my parents are proud. My parents are immigrants from Vietnam. They came here back in, I think, 1990. They went to Houston. My parents moved to Amarillo because of a job opportunity. I want to say they did a really good job at raising me and my brothers. We, our only our goal right now is just to finish college and just to make them proud. They don't want us to have the same struggles that they went through. You know, they've worked really, really hard, and we're a middle class family, just your ordinary family. They didn't have that opportunity. I think my dad, he didn't finish middle school. My mom, I think she finished her ninth grade year in high school in Vietnam, and that's something that they don't really talk much because they're embarrassed about. But they want to let me know that that's not what they see for my future. They want the complete opposite. I know for sure, especially at Amarillo College, everyone's here to help no matter what. And I feel like as long as first year generation students aren't scared to step out and ask for that help, then that would be a tremendous step into their career, into their college education, you know. And I think as a community, we just need to know that even as a first year generation students, we need that little help, we need that little push. And that's what's going to make a difference. That's going to make a difference between applying to college and walking that stage and getting a degree. My dad is not a big show of his, affection. And I told him, I'm graduating college, and I think he shed a tear the first time ever. And I'm sorry. Oh, everything, all the didn't have a calculator, all the struggles I went through, that just flipped my whole body. I saw his smile, and I made him proud. And that means everything to me.
I wanted you to meet Linda because I think we have so many Marias and Lindas walking our campuses, but we almost lost her. So Linda was in the top 10 of her graduating class locally. It's a low-income, high at-risk student population. She came to Amarillo College, first in her family, first generation, and she tested straight into college algebra. She got 100 on all of her homework, and the first test she took, she got a 32. So what the old Amarillo College would have done and thought is probably what you and your peers might have thought. Here's a student that got 100 on her homework and a 32 on the test. She either has really high test anxiety, or someone helped her on her homework, or she was cheating on her homework, or she didn't study, or she wasn't really serious. But at Amarillo College, with our no excuses philosophy that I'll reference in a little bit, anytime we see behavior that indicates that a student is struggling, instead of judging it, we ask about it. And what we learned in asking Linda of what happened between her homework and her test sent us on a journey of action that is reshaping our college from top to bottom. What she told us is that she didn't have a calculator, and the instructor was incredulous and pulled out the syllabus, and it says right here, you have to have this textbook and TI 1482. Well, as a first gen college student, Linda didn't know that TI 1384 or 1482, whatever the number was a Texas Instruments calculator. She thought that related to the textbook, which she purchased. So she was doing all of her homework longhand. The test was timed, and was doing her work on the test longhand. So in talking with her about a calculator, she went to Walmart and it was $84 on sale and she didn't have it. And so she was getting ready to drop out of school because she thought that her failure on the test and inability to purchase the calculator meant that she didn't belong. Instead, she looks exactly like many of our students look like. They have barriers that we didn't understand. And so at Amarillo College, we spent a lot of time trying to understand what our students need. And to upset the Spice Girls, we talk a lot about we have to understand what our students really, really need. And this is what they needed. When I talked to those students, like I talked with Linda, and asked them to tell me what was keeping them from being successful in the classroom, the top 10 issues they identified had nothing to do with the classroom or instruction. It was childcare, transportation, housing, food, legal services, utility assistance. And one of the things that I learned is that is how much it costs to be poor in this country. Every institution that has a fee associated with either a bounced check or reconnection if your water's cut off or your electricity's cut off. And I'm not impugning or complaining about them, but the very people who are trying to balance few resources are often financially penalized when they're incapable of doing so. And then we worked with Sarah Goldrick Robb in the Hope Lab out of Temple, and she came in and affirmed what we had already figured out, but in an even more devastating way. 72% of all of our students have at least one basic need in security. 72%. I want you to think about that because your students aren't that different than mine. If you had 72% of your students that were unified in some need, you would turn your institutions upside down to figure out how to address that need. Poverty barriers have got to be addressed with the same urgency, intentionality, and budget. For Amarillo College, 59% of my students were housing insecure during one academic year. 54% of them had food insecurity, which means that they had sacrificed a meal at least once a week over a year due to lack of resources. And 11% of my students had been homeless in the past year. So housing insecurity includes things like couch surfing or not sure where you're going to live or if you're going to have the money to pay for where you're living. Homelessness means that over an extended period of time, you had nowhere to live. What really struck me when we dissected this data even further is that of my homeless population, which was about 1,000 students at my college, were homeless at one point during our academic year. Only a handful of them were living in any of the shelters in our community. And a large number of our students were living in abandoned cars or a car they owned or in abandoned buildings and still going to school. So at Amarillo College, we talk a lot about Maria, about Linda, about our students in general. And my driving philosophy is this, that we must absolutely love the students we have rather than the students we wished we had or thought we had. When you get clear on who your Maria is, you've got to love her for who she is, not who she wished you were or who you thought she was. And so often in higher education that is bound to tradition, we're set up for a student that no longer exists. And so my challenge for you is to love the students you have. And that functionally is our theory of change, that if we can remove at least one of our students' life barriers and provide a coach relationship that can help them navigate our systems, that students will increase their ability to complete a degree and or transfer. And at Amarillo College, that's working. And one of the reasons that theory of change is working is that we truly have embraced a culture of caring through college values that were defined by students, written by students, and those values are all about service and relationship. So we hold ourselves accountable to that. But it's grounded in a no excuses philosophy that is quite simple, that when we see what's happening with our students, we as the leaders, as the faculty and the staff of Amarillo College, we have absolutely no excuse for a student failure. So if a student drops out or they fail out, then it means that we didn't have the right systems or the right people in place to ensure their success. The world that we're living in, the accountability measures that are being tied to our funding, we don't get to be the institutions that say we give our students opportunities to succeed or fail. We have to build systems that ensure their success, because if we don't, we're actually harming the economies of the communities in which we reside. The foundation of this theory of change is truly building a culture of caring from every employee within our institution. And that culture of caring is focused on three different parts of the chart that I'm sharing with you now. We have the part that's focused on eradicating student poverty barriers with food pantries, clothing closets. We have social workers, legal aid to help students migrate through the legal challenges, a counseling center, a career center that's as focused on helping them find employment now while they're a student as it is connecting them to living wages when they graduate, and connecting to the plethora of resources that reside in our communities and the resources that reside on our campus. Those systemic approaches to poverty barriers are also coordinated with our accelerated learning systems, where we have reformed our developmental education and general education that includes mandatory tutoring and accelerated pathways to college readiness, where I referenced where we're trying desperately to keep students out of dev ed with a lot of pre-engagement work while they're still in high school. It also includes what we've done at Amarillo College, which is to go all in on a master schedule that has 85% of our classes offered an accelerated 8-week format. What's happened with our 8-week classes is not only are students actually staying in school with higher retention rates, their learning outcomes have increased in an 8-week accelerated format. Those two things are wrapped in data analytics and predictive modeling. So the work that we're doing now to eradicate poverty barriers is wrapped around data analytics that gives us information and specific students to target that indicate they have some poverty barrier, and connect them to these resources before they start class. So the culture of caring is about being proactive and connecting students to resources to avoid a crisis, rather than being reactive and only intervening once a crisis has happened to our students. This work really started with a poverty certification. We work with Dr. Donna Beagle, who is a remarkable trainer who was 15 and a single mother and homeless, who now has a PhD in sociology and travels the world trying to help people understand the difference between generational poverty and situational poverty, and helping people understand what a generational poverty experience, how it shapes your worldview, how it shapes your learning and your understanding of yourself and the communities in which you live. And I want you to meet Donna really quickly.
What happens when you don't teach about poverty is it ends up being framed as the people's problem. So like we were talking about earlier, where we're the only country who tell people you are the cause of poverty. If you would just work harder, and you know the numbers are clear, 2/3 of the people are working, many people working 2 jobs, many people working 3 jobs, still getting evicted, still going hungry, making choices between utilities and their rent. So our realities about poverty, they don't match our thinking about what's possible.
So at Amarillo College, we had required training where all employees went through a poverty certification. And then we have a little under 100 of our employees out of 600 full-time employees who've been certified by Donna as poverty coaches. And what that helped us, that poverty education helped us understand, is that our stereotypes of poverty are built on really erroneous misunderstandings of who our neighbors are, and that poverty, people living in generational poverty, are not choosing it, they're not lazy, and they're not avoiding work. The majority of our students that are living in the war zone of poverty are working while they go to school. The issue is that they're working in jobs that don't pay a living wage, and in jobs that don't offer benefits. And so in our community, which I'm assuming is similar to yours, we have a lot of students that that are working in jobs with no benefits, and so they're not able to ever get ahead. They're living in a survival mode, and Donna helped us understand what that looked like when they entered our classrooms. Then we focus on using actionable data. We have a data analytics leadership report card that gives us really specific data and gives faculty very specific data to their classes and their class experiences and effectiveness, and allows us to certain students for interventions before they actually need them. One of the other things that we do is that we close the college down once each semester. We call it our all college meeting. We put signs on our office doors that we've closed to focus on student success, and we look at data, we listen to students, and then we try to make the data that we're looking at actionable, but also personal. At Amarillo College, we've had a really big increase since we've done this work in our completion numbers, but it's easy to celebrate an increase in number, but it's harder to celebrate that when you realize you still have students that are missing from that success. So one of the things that we do each year is we follow a cohort of students that are representative of our entire student body, and we use their faces once a month to track how we're doing. And this is an example. There's a longer video that would normally go with this, but I wanted you to see that every month we see this composite of our actual students, and if they've dropped out or stopped out, their face disappears. So while we've had a tremendous increase in retention, it's hard to celebrate that when you realize that some of the people we're losing are students that we had a relationship with or that we lived next door to, and students that still deserve our love and support. This is also something that we show at the beginning of every Board of Regents meeting as a way to keep our Board of Regent leadership engaged and personally involved in the data work that we are engaging in. The other thing that I want you to think through is building your ARC. We have an advocacy and resource center. So we talked about 8-week classes, and we talked about eradicating social poverty barriers. Our advocacy and resource center is where we have our food pantry, our clothing closets, where we have our 2.5 social workers that we've hired, but then we have our case managers. I want to talk about the case managers briefly because what they do is so important, and your ability to engage with them yourself is so easy. Our case managers are social work students from our local university in our community at the undergraduate and master's level. In social work, those students are required to do 300 to 400 hours of field placement in a semester before they graduate. And so the local university is allowing their social work students to intern out of our ARC and report to our director of social interventions. And so our social work students from the university are actually our case managers for our students as they integrate into our social services interventions. Since we moved our ARC from the outskirts of the campus and next to a food pantry that was literally in a closet, and we put it in the heart of the campus in an all-glass enclosure that's one of the first things that every student sees, the usage of our Advocacy and Resource Center has skyrocketed. In the last year alone, we went from serving 6 to 7% of our entire student body to 30% of our entire student body in some form or fashion through the ARC. One of the ways that we've been able to have tremendous impact in keeping students is in class and then graduating is to have a really effective and efficient emergency aid system. Now, a lot of schools have emergency aid. What I've noticed in talking with many of you is that your emergency aid is wrapped in bureaucracy and red tape, so much so that we seem so scared to use it that many of us haven't spent a dime out of it in years, literally some schools in decades. Our Amarillo College Foundation gives us $60,000 a year for emergency aid. And our goal is that when a student comes in and has a need, whether it's to get a transmission fixed or to pay a deposit to get into an apartment or to pay a portion of a child care bill, if we cannot find a way through our community service providers to meet those needs, then within 24 hours of meeting that need, our foundation will have paid that need directly to the service in which that student is needing emergency help. Here's where the most of our emergency aid goes to. 32% of our monies are actually going to help provide academic support. Purchasing books, tools are a big part of what we're helping purchase. Tools for our hands-on auto body, auto mechanics, diesel mechanics. 31% is for housing assistance. Because our students are working, a lot of them can afford rent, but what they can't afford is the deposit that's required to get into the apartment, and so we work with them on that. And then we work with a lot of students to pay off utility bills to keep water, gas, and electricity going. And I want to give you some hope that the work that we're doing is working, and I want you to meet one student for whom it's worked for.
Once I got interested in actually going to college, that took a lot out of me because I never thought that at my age that I would be able to graduate, go to school, much less graduate. I'm 33 years old. I just turned 33 December 31st, 15 days after my graduation. I relocated, for one, relocating to Amarillo. You know, I'm from Wellington, Texas. It's an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes away. And so just the thought of moving to Amarillo was a big thing for me. I had to get out of myself, out of being, you know, my comfort zone, because I don't know anybody in Amarillo. The only thing that I got is myself, my wife, and my kids, and you know, that was it was scary. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 classes a semester, 4 days a week, 8 in the morning to 1:30 in the evening, you know, and so for me, that was also a struggle, thinking to myself that, you know, how am I going to be able to make car payments, you know, just the fight in me, the part of me that told me not to give up, you know, I went out and I looked around for jobs that had that evening schedule that I could take in order to work a full-time job. And I did. Derek Lyons is one of my teachers from the advanced diesel course, and he's an awesome teacher. And he gets into the students. You know, he figures out the things that you like, the things that you're good at, what you're learning, what he needs to improvise on. But he found me a job. You know, he found me a full-time job that I could work 8 hours a day and go to school 5 hours a day and make everything work. There was several times that like I said, I just wanted to quit, and life just threw curveballs at me left and right. We were planning on bringing another addition to the family, and well, my wife had some complications. We went to the hospital, and they did an emergency surgery on her right away, and it took about 2 hours, and we weren't able to have the baby, but maybe it wasn't the right time. Maybe I don't know. Life knows what it's doing. My mom gave me a pickup. This is an old pickup. You know, I'm not old school, but I'm old school. And this truck, it's a '92 Chevy Silverado. It's standard. And she gave it to me. She said, "Mijo," she said, you're close enough to where you're going to graduate. I can see it. Said, I can see you graduating. We're not gonna miss it for the world. She said, you can have this truck. I said, Mom, that truck don't even run. He said, well, ain't that what you're going to school for? I said, well, yeah. I did. I got under the hood. I put everything together, took out what needed to come out, and put in what needed to go in, and I got the truck running. Well, the transmission went out. So I got a buddy of mine. He helped me tow it up here to Amarillo, and by that time I was broke. So once I was having those problems, I came to Jordan, to Judith and Jordan, and asked, what are the possibilities that they would be able to help me cover some of these things. And Jordan says, well, so we can look into it. So we do have some funding that's for emergencies. So I brought her the receipts on some of the stuff that I spend. She said, okay. She said it amounts to this much and this much. I'm gonna turn these numbers in to the foundation, and in a few days they're gonna cut you a check. What do you mean? Well, yeah, you're approved, and he said, in order for you to keep coming back to school, this is something that we need to help you with, because we feel that if you're not making it to school, then we've done nothing. They've done so much for me, even with the transportation. They also helped me cover some of my tuition, and even the food pantry. We were able to. They helped us keep everything together. They said, you're gonna need a cap and a gown. I was like, wow, man, I'm out of money. I'm out of time. They said, well, Jordan said, well, don't even worry about it. I think we've got one we can loan you. I said, well, man, they just amaze me every time that they just keep giving, and I'm glad that they've been able to do that, because that was something else that I didn't have to spend money on, was my cap and gown. Well, I was talking to my advisor, Claudia, and she said, you find out what picture you want on your invitation, what you want your invitation to say, and I'm going to help you with it. I said, no way. I said, you don't have to do that. I said, I'll find a way. I said, if my friends and family really want to see me, I said, I'll write them a Post-it sticker and put it on their front door. And if they really want to come, then they'll be here. She said, oh, no. She said, you're going to do it the right way. To be a part of something so big, to me, just blew my mind. The day that I showed up there to the Civic Center for the graduation, I had my cap and my gown, and I was walking in there, and I kept seeing caps and gowns pass by. There's so many of them. Is it really this new graduating? For me to be a part of something so big was freaking awesome.
In our work with Renee, we only connected with Renee because we added a social service concern to our early alert system that's embedded in all of our faculty grade books. So a faculty knew he was struggling, and early alerted him, and that early alert automatically went to our advocacy and resource center, and they reached out to him. Our work with Renee and others is having a tremendous impact. In the last 2 years alone, our completion rate has grown from 23%. Our 3-year completion rate's grown from 23% to 45%. There's a lot of details that I think that if you were to read the case study that the Hope Lab and Sarah Goldrick Robb released about our work on Monday, it will fill in a lot of the gaps that I've not been able to fill in today. But I really wanted you to understand how comprehensive the work is, but truly how, for a lot of you, you already have these pieces of the puzzle in your college. You have food pantries, you have clothing closets, you have early alert systems, you have data analytics. But to use the information you already have and the work that you're already doing and intentionally piecing it together in a systemic approach to solving these barriers for your students so they can actually graduate from your schools and become citizens that are going to be really productive in the workforce for decades to come.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that overview. And as I shared in the handouts that are in your dashboard, there is a link to the case study that Dr. Lowry referenced. We have a couple of questions, and I'd like to encourage everyone else to go ahead and submit a question. First, does Amarillo College have systems in place to help students who qualify for public benefits like SNAP and TANF to access those benefits, and how are those students identified?
So when we work with our local agencies and the really intentionally work with those agencies. So if we have students that we know that qualify for SNAP or TANF, then we help them maintain those benefits. If we have students that could qualify but haven't applied or don't know about it, then we connect them to those social service agencies in the community. And what we've tried to build is something intentional where it's not what I hate is we pass the student off to another office. We have a lot of the information that our partnering agencies need. And so we're helping them collect that information and helping students complete those applications while they're on site with us. And then we're delivering those applications directly to our counterparts in those social service agencies and interventions in the community.
That's great. Couple of questions came through. First, somebody shared that the link to the resource handout is broken. I apologize for that. I will make sure we send that out with the recording and slides after the session. So if you've registered for it, you will get the copy of that sent out. So my apologies. Secondly, a couple things. When did No Excuses Initiative begin? And related to that, how did you go about gathering data did you do it through an institutional survey? How did you begin collecting the data to start the systems and resource center that, essentially made the case for that?
We started the work on poverty in 2011, but we didn't start building a systemic approach until 2012. And it started with collecting data. We did our own focus groups. I did the focus groups myself. We did internal survey that just asked students what their barriers were. And then we added questions to the SENSE survey and the SESI. As an institution, you're allowed to add some questions in the end. And so we just ask, how many hours are you working? What are your biggest barriers? And then that gave us enough data to understand how profound the work was. I would say we've taken this to scale, and at Amarillo College, scale means that it affects at least 20% and serves at least 20% of the entire student body. We took it to scale in 2015, and the minute we took it to scale is when we started to see dramatic increases in our completion rates. So we had limited data to begin with, but enough to know that it's what we needed to focus on, enough to know that we needed to provide training on what it was, just a basic understanding of the training. And I will say, I used the word required for all my faculty when we did the training, and I was the vice president of academic affairs at that time. And they went through it, and their reaction to it was really positive because they had been seeing students sleep in class or not coming to class, and internalizing that as a commentary on their teaching skills. And once we adopted a no excuses philosophy that we needed to find out what the behavior was rather than just judge it, I think they were able to understand that a lot of the behaviors they had internalized and judged didn't have anything to do with them. It was truly the life experiences that our students were bringing with them. And that started the conversation. But frankly, it wasn't until the day after the training that we realized we needed to be more systemic, because the day after the training, I'm literally sitting in my office with my team and patting ourselves on the back on how courageous we were for requiring training of the entire college. And our faculty started calling community agencies. We had 8 different faculty calling about 7 different homeless students. And it took one of those agencies to track them all down. And she called me the next day in the afternoon and said, "Russell, you are killing us. We've been running around trying to find homes for 7 different students and realized that all of your faculty were calling about the exact same student." That's when we realized we had to start building systems to allow our faculty and staff to act on their newfound knowledge. And that happened in 2012 and 13, and the scaling of it happened in 15.
And one of the things that I think your example brings to bear, which is, what you shared earlier, a lot of what you're doing are things that other campuses are doing maybe in a scattershot way, but it's really taking that overarching system approach and bringing it all together that is really accelerating the progress. We are getting low of time, and there's several questions related to funding, which, as you saw earlier, was one of the challenges people were raising. How did you go about getting the initial structures and resource center funded? Is there an assistance limit amount for your emergency assistance? And then how did you go about changing the procedures for the emergency funding so that you could disperse, in a simple and quick way?
So I'll be really quick. So we started all of this work with grant funding. All of our social workers was grant funded. Our food pantry is still funded through donations from our community and our faculty and staff. We've institutionalized our social workers. The emergency aid is all funded through fundraising that I engage in and our foundation engages in. But I think the misnomer is that this requires a lot of money. What it requires is intentional relationships to your service providers who have the resources to meet these needs, and they are our first option. We always try to find a community partner that can solve the problem our student is experiencing. And then we try to find scholarships that they can apply for that could meet some of those needs. It's only when we have no other options that we use our emergency aid. We track the number of times a student uses it, and if we feel like a student is using it repeatedly, then we'll have a more intentional conversation about what's going on and try to provide some structural support. But you would be shocked. I think people are so afraid that someone who doesn't have anything might get more than they need, that they feel like they have to have students prove. Trust your students. They're not going to take more than they need. And often our students give back after they've taken money.
Well, with that, I know there's a couple of other questions we didn't get to. I will send those out to Dr. Lowry Hart after the the webinar so we can make sure you get your questions answered. Many thanks to you, Dr. Laurie Hart, for being such an innovative leader on this front. Hopefully we'll have you back in another year to share your progress. I think that's really part of what people are trying to get to, is how do you pull this all together so you can have a greater impact than just that scattershot approach we were talking about. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you got something out of this that you can take back to your institutions. Please join us for our next webinar, which will be around FAFSA is not enough, how verification keeps students from entering college. So a related topic with our friends and partners at the National College Access Network. Have a great day, you all, and thanks for tuning in.
Bye.